B.F. Skinner, the Father of Behaviorism, a presentation by Ethel Barron, Nicolette Chetta, Lindy Davis, and Tessa Schroffet. Please take a moment to grab a pen and paper to take notes. The information in this presentation will be used for a class activity. Skinner was born in 1904 in a small town in Pennsylvania. He grew up in a stable household with one younger brother. His father was a lawyer and his mother was a homemaker. As a child, Skinner liked to build things. Skinner graduated from Hamilton College as a writer and was working at a bookstore when he discovered books by Pavlov and Watson. He would later return to graduate school at Harvard University as a researcher. Skinner eventually received his Ph.D. from Harvard. While working to attain his Ph.D. at Harvard, Skinner experimented with rats. He would place the rats inside a box, which would later be called Skinner's box. Initially, the rats did not press the lever that would release food, based on previous stimuli. Watson and Pavlov, however, insisted the rats would indeed press the lever. As the rat moved about the box, it would accidentally knock the lever. By doing so, a food pellet would drop into a container located next to the lever. The rats quickly learned to go straight to the lever after a few times of being placed inside the box. The consequence of receiving food if they pressed the lever ensured they would repeat again and again, thus explaining how positive reinforcement works. In other words, their behavior depended on the environment and its effects. Skinner named this operant conditioning. Skinner believed that classical conditioning was a simplistic explanation for all of the complex human behaviors. He believed that we should be looking at both the causes and the consequences of an action. He continued his research on other animals, including pigeons. So how does this relate to humans? Skinner felt that when we punish a person for undesirable behavior, we place the responsibility on him or her to learn proper behavior. Then the person can receive credit for behaving in a desired manner. Operant conditioning allows us to modify behavior by using positive and negative reinforcement. Reinforcers are responses from the environment that increase the probability of a behavior being repeated. When behavior is reinforced, it is strengthened or repeated. When behavior is not reinforced, it weakens or disappears. Reinforcers can be either positive or negative. Behavior modification is based on operant conditioning. Behavior modification is the use of techniques in a secluded approach in which desired behaviors are rewarded and undesirable behaviors are punished. The goal is to replace undesirable behavior with more desirable ones using operant conditioning. According to Skinner, all behavior is characterized as being controlled by external factors in the environment. Behavior modification can be used to achieve desired behavior from individuals at any functional level. Since behavior modification is such a broad technique, almost anyone can benefit from it. Every student in the classroom can be reached by some form of behavior modification. We see that behavior modification is especially helpful with students who have attention deficit disorder, autism, or oppositional defiant disorder. Behavior modification can be used in any scenario where a behavior is desired to either increase or decrease. That desire exists in many different settings. Therefore, we can also see how behavior modification can be successfully implemented in classrooms, organizations, and businesses. By looking at the vast uses for this technique, it is easy to see why it is so important to understand what behavior modification is and how to use it. Let's look at an example of behavior modification used with a student with autism. Lucy is a 5-year-old student with autism. The desired behavior is that Lucy would be able to say "Mom." Her treatment begins with exploring the sound. Every time she achieves the goal of making the sound, she is rewarded with a treat, possibly a minute of playtime, a skittle, a hug, a smile, or some other small treat. Once Lucy consistently achieves her goal of creating the sound, her treatment goal will advance to making the "ma" sound. Now she is only rewarded when she creates the "ma" sound. After mastering the "ma" goal, her treatment will advance to saying the whole word "mom." Can you guess whether this behavior modification technique was reinforcement or punishment? Right, it is reinforcement because we were trying to increase a desired behavior. Now, is it positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement? If you guessed positive reinforcement, then you were correct. It is positive reinforcement because we are provided a positive reward when the desired behavior is met. Positive reinforcement. Positive reinforcement is adding something that will motivate the child or individual to increase the likelihood they will engage in that behavior again. Positive reinforcement looks like a mother who gives her daughter candy for cleaning up her toys. Negative reinforcement. Negative reinforcement is taking something negative away in order to increase a response. What does negative reinforcement look like? Negative reinforcement looks like a child who is told that she will not have to do her chores if she gets A's on her report card. Things to keep in mind about negative reinforcement. Negative reinforcement should not be thought of as a punishment procedure. With negative reinforcement, you are increasing a behavior, whereas with punishment procedure, you are decreasing a behavior. Let's look at one more example. Mrs. Smith's class keeps talking during silent reading time. She decides to implement behavior modification. Every time the class talks during silent reading time, she takes away a minute of their recess. If she has to tell the class to be quiet more than 5 times, they lose their entire recess. Is this an example of reinforcement or punishment? It is punishment because Mrs. Smith is trying to get her class to stop talking during silent reading time. Now, is it positive punishment or negative punishment? Right, it is negative punishment because every time they talk, she takes something away from them. Let's review and see if you can match the scenarios to their proper punishment reinforcement type. Okay, so what is scenario 1 an example of? It is negative reinforcement because we are trying to increase a behavior, but instead of supplying a reward, we are taking away something bad every time the child performs the desired behavior. What is scenario 2 an example of? It is positive punishment because we are trying to decrease a behavior, but we are doing it by adding an undesired consequence. What is scenario 3 an example of? It is positive reinforcement because we are trying to increase a behavior by giving a positive reward every time it is performed. What is scenario 4 an example of? It is negative punishment because we are trying to decrease a behavior and we are taking away something when the undesired behavior is performed. Ways to use positive reinforcement in the classroom. Have a rewards chart with each student's name on it. Each time the student completes the required activity, give him or her a sticker to place by his or her name on the chart. Simply say, "Good job," and smile when passing back papers and tests. Compliment a student's good behavior in the classroom. So what does all of this mean to me? As future teachers, it is very important for us to understand how to address both undesirable and desirable behaviors. One of our roles in the classroom is to be an effective disciplinarian. A deep understanding of how to properly use Skinner's behavior modification technique will save us much time and energy in the classroom. As we finish this video presentation, begin to think of those desired behaviors you will have for your classroom one day, and think about how you could use behavior modification to attain those goals.